Hello, this is Steve Turner from Mudhoney, and you're listening to 89 FN on Haidja Horte.
89 é Rádio Rock, eu sou a Giulia e eu tô aqui com o Steve Turner, da banda Mudhoney. Steve, you're going to play in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Curitiba. What can the public expect from this concert?
Well, we've been doing this a long time. We've been there a few times in the past. It's been way too long since we were in Brazil. But, we'll play hopefully all the old classics that people want and a bunch of new songs off the last record.
And this is your seventh visit to Brazil. What attracts you the most about the Brazilian public?
The fans there are so great, and it's so fun to play in Brazil. We were surprised how great it was when we first went there because we'd never been there before. We'd heard stories. I think the Ramones had their greatest crowd, and fan base in Brazil out of anywhere in the world, and uh, you know that spoke to us.
And how does this energy of the audience influence your performance on stage?
It helps a lot, when we see the crowd having a great time and going crazy to a certain level. It's great. We don't like seeing people fighting and stuff, which used to happen a little bit more. But our crowds everywhere seem to be a lot friendlier than they were back in the '90s.
And Steve, it's been more than 30 years of Mudhoney.
37.
So yes, more than 30
It's been 37 years now.
More than 3 decades of career. How do you perceive the change in your audience? Like, is there more long-time fans, or is there a new generation of fans emerging?
It's a very mixed group of people at this point. I mean, there's definitely old guys in the crowd like us, and women too, obviously. I love it when it's like the parents are bringing their kids and they're really excited about it. It's really fun for me because most and stuff. That's always fun to see the generations showing up at this point. We always used to joke that there was always several sad Cobains in the crowd. It was people that were dressed sort of like Kurt Cobain and looking sad for whatever reason. That seems to have tapered off a bit, and there's not as many as that. But obviously, we're part of a thing that happened historically that people are really into. The first time I ever heard the term the grunge revolution was in Brazil. Like the first time I went there, some people were talking. I was like, "What are you talking about?" It was just a bunch of bands. But it's a scene that lives on, and I recognize that, and I'm happy to be part of it. I loved all those bands and people, so.
And when it comes to Brazil, do you have any memorable moments here from the times you came earlier?
Oh, sure. The some of the biggest shows I think we've ever played were with Pearl Jam when we were there in 2004. Those were insane. Giant, football stadiums and stuff. So that was pretty wild. The first time we came, we had a different bass player because Matt Lucan had just quit. We had Steve Dukic on that trip. It was just a Seattle buddy of ours, and he and I were both skateboarders, and we brought our skateboards down, and we were taken to a few skate parks, in Sao Paulo and Rio, I believe. I think that might have been the only two that we got to, but that was really fun. And we met some really cool people and saw some great young Brazilian skateboarders and stuff. That really sticks out in my mind.
And Mudhoney was formed in 1988 and is considered one of the first grunge bands ever. How do you see the evolution of the band during this decade? And more than that, how do you see grunge's evolution over all these years?
Yeah. Well, when we started, we just considered ourselves another punk band because we all came up through punk rock and hardcore in the earlier '80s. Seattle had a great scene at the time, and a lot of the bands were slowing down and getting a little bit groovier, if you will. Um, Bruce Pavitt from Sub Pop called it heavy and sexy, and Soundgarden is a great example of that. Where they slowed it down into a little bit of a Led Zeppelin influence on them. Like, I don't believe I had any Led Zeppelin influence on me, but um, you know, it just kind of evolved into this thing where there was a certain not there's not a lot of similarities. I mean, Pearl Jam, really bristled at the term grunge because they're not grungy. I mean, we're grungy if anybody is. We have really dirty, nasty guitar sounds and stuff like that. We're like a grungy punk band with other influences. I mean, we've evolved a little bit through the years, but not a whole lot because we have Mark's voice, we have our guitar playing and Dan's drumming, and Guy's bass playing. Obviously, at this point for the last 24 years, uh, we do what we do, and I think the last couple of records we made have been great, but they're also, there's some diversity on there. I hope, we're not the Ramones, where they just did one thing kind of, but they did it great. They invented it. Um, you know, it's amazing that we're still around. But the only reason we're still around is because we like each other and we like what we do.
If you could give an advice to new bands who want to have a long and consistent career as yours, what would you say?
Sure. The two main points of advice we always give people is make music with your friends and split the songwriting royalty equally. Because again, the Ramones, their first four albums, they split the royalties for songwriting equally. Then after that, they started arguing about who wrote the songs, and then they were never the same again. So, just be friendly, play with your friends, and try to have a good time.
Now, talking about Plastic Eternity, your latest release, how was the creation process? And more than that, how do you keep your creativity alive over all these years?
Well, that's a challenge. Uh, for this record, we did it coming out of the COVID lockdowns, so we hadn't seen each other for a year and a half, and we had a timeline where we had to get a record made if we wanted to get back on the road, and so we hadn't finished all the songs, which is a first case we've ever done that, where we wrote some of the songs in the studio and had to come up with it quickly, which I think is great because when you're a young band, you come up with things quickly. As you get older, I think there's a tendency to overthink things, and we didn't have the time to overthink anything. We just had to get it done, and I think that really helped us get this record done. Mark's in the hardest position because he has to come up with lyrics that don't sound like something he's done before to him, and also doesn't sound like he's trying to be 20 years old again. So he's in the hardest situation, and sometimes he has a hard time coming up with lyrics, but I totally get it. I mean, I've been a songwriter, I've done solo records, and I can't come up with a single song anymore. I in some ways, rock bands maybe shouldn't be together for 37 years. But we love doing it, so we keep doing it, and lots of other people do as well. And one of the other things about my generation, and hopefully the next ones that are coming up, we don't age the same way that my parents did. Things were blocked out in decades where you couldn't do the same things anymore. We just keep trying to do the same stuff that we did when we were 15 forever. I still skateboard. I'm about to turn 60, and I play in a punk band and I skateboard, and I've been doing that since I've been 17 years old.
And Mudhoney has always had critical and direct lyrics. Nowadays, how do you address which themes you're going to write about?
Well, that's all up to Mark. He writes the lyrics. You know, going back to our roots as a hardcore band, he wrote political lyrics in 1981. He kind of stopped writing political lyrics for a while in the early Green River and Mudhoney days, but then kind of got back to it as an older guy. We write more songs than go on the records, and I'm happy to let Mark decide what songs end up on the record, and a lot of it is lyrically themed. I think he does a great job of picking the songs that are going to end up there. I love his lyrics. They're really creative, but they take a while sometimes.
And what difference do you notice in the music industry from the beginning of your career until today? Because now we have new platforms, new streaming platforms, new technologies, internet, social media, and that kind of stuff.
Sure, but I leave that to the experts at Sub Pop Records to deal with. It's changed a lot, obviously, but I never really paid much attention to the record industry as such or mainstream anything. I was thoroughly in the underground. And, when, Pearl Jam and Nirvana hit big in 91, we got swept up in that and got signed to Warner Brothers. And that was an eye opening experience. It wasn't a bad experience. I think we made the right decision to sign with Warner's. I think we stayed there a little bit too long, and I was very happy to get back to Sub Pop and be back on a smaller level because we knew we weren't going to be, radio friendly band or anything. We're exactly where we should be, I think. And uh, as far as the way people distribute and listen to music these days, I'm very happy that vinyl came back the way it has. Uh, I've been a record dealer for the last 20 years, and I love vinyl, I love music, I love collecting records, but I'm also really fascinated by how you can basically find any song you're looking for online at this point. It's very rare to find something that's not available free online, and I think that's fine. And kids digest music differently now. It's not, you don't go buy a record and study that record for 2 weeks like I did when I was a kid. You just find a song you like and then find another song you like. I've got two adult kids. I know how they do it, and that's fine too. You know, bands basically bands don't make money from any of the streaming stuff unless you're a mega star. But it helps get your name out there, and the only way young, smaller bands make any money is going on tour. And that's kind of the same for us as well. We make a little tiny bit, but we only make money touring, but we don't tour very much, so we don't make very much money.
And if you had to define Mudhoney in just one song, what would it be and why?
Uh, I usually, when I think about that, I usually point to "Suck You Dry." I think that's one of our greatest songs, and it sums up what we are: fuzz guitar, gnarly singing, great rhythm section, and it's also catchy. Uh, so I usually use that one. I was really satisfied with that song, and I remain really satisfied with that song. I mean, I like a lot of our songs. I mean, but I think that sums up kind of our sound.
And Steve, to finish, can you send a message to your Brazilian fans who can't wait to see Mudhoney live?
Well, we can't wait to see them either. It's been way too long. It's been 14 years since we were there. So, we're all really, really looking forward to it. We love Brazil.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for your time.
Sure, thank you.
89, a Rádio Rock.